and then go live on Abstract. So let's start the stream over there. And let's see what screenshot it got of us. Probably me like teeth or something. Oh, not bad. I'll show you. Yeah, I do. Okay, I'm not going to get into like all the things that I would like to see changed, but the wallet, like, kind of right there for everybody. Also, they know from day one that I had about $1,100 in there. Now I do not. I'm a terrible gambler, like terrible. But I thought it would be,
That makes two of us.
yeah. I was just like, I'm just gonna load up some ETH and see what
I mean,
happens. And it was fun. It was a fun day.
yeah.
So
Um,
I don't know. I never really welcome like just go live. Like that's what I've been doing lately. Michael, I think when we talked it was before launch.
mhm.
And we've both kind of gone and done some things and I've been thoroughly enjoying my return, I guess, to live streaming because I forgot how, I don't know, cathartic it is for someone like me. Like doing pre-recorded video or even the funny stuff or interviews and then has to be chopped up is really time consuming. And so the
Yeah.
live stream piece of it is really um it's easier for me anyway. I think a lot of people are kind of struggling like what do I say? It's like just
Yeah.
chat. Just have a chat or play games or whatever. So it's been really cool. And so I just was like, I would love to follow up and on the boring business side, how are
Yeah.
things? Like how did everything just go off without a hitch? How's everything kind of behind the scenes?
I think I think one, on streaming, especially live streaming, I am, I think you'll find, and everyone, on Abstract Live will find like a younger audience base, right? And you kind of see
Yeah.
this in Web 2, right? Where there's like those of us that kind of, probably younger, Gen Xers and older millennials that kind of came up through like the Instagram era where everything was like really curated.
Mm. Yeah.
And then you just have, Gen Z and now kind of, you know, Gen Alpha where, again, like it comes back to like, just intentionally, being like in the moment, right? Everything is messed.
Yeah.
Like TikTok is just, it just feels like a dumpster fire of just content, just unedited,
Yes.
uncurated. But again, like that's actually intentional.
Yeah.
So, you know, I I like to think that as you bring streaming on chain and put it on crypto rails, and it's these the vast majority of crypto natives are the folks who just grew up on crypto rail, right? Like
Yeah.
now kind of Gen A and younger Gen Z. And I think this will
Yeah.
resonate better with, at least from like an audience perspective, like this format will resonate better than just kind of your kind of produced, podcast that's all chopped up. And there's like
Right.
a certain, there's like a certain narrative that you're trying to produce. I think people, I've again, like sample size, is like 50, but so far the feedback that I've been getting is like people love it. All these
Yeah.
content creators experimenting, kind of bringing their,
Right.
what they do on Twitch, YouTube, on Twitter, like on chain, like, they're just, they're here for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been interesting, like, you know, I I've struggled a little bit because I am substantially older than a lot of the content creators, in crypto Twitter, and my content's more boring. And um, but I know that my audience isn't going to want to watch younger people play video games on stream. But one of the things, and I don't know if anybody's had like constructive criticism for you yet on live stream. Um, and it's not really. It's just more of a like,
But send it, right?
so
Like
so like
the platform's not
I
going to get
really
better
want to
unless
do
you send that
I know.
criticism. that feedback.
and I think I don't know if you know, but Saigar and I have like a DM going, and I'm like, "What is this?" And he's like, "Don't worry about it. We're working on it." And like the thing where, with the scam tokens showing up,
Hmm.
I was like, I feel like that was because I kept saying like, "This I'm showing my screen and it says I have $5,000 in here and I
Yeah.
don't like it whatever." So he fixed that. I was like, "You're welcome." I'm just kidding. Sure everybody saw that. But I think that just the idea that first of all, I think it's a little confusing for a lot of people, like, what even gets you XP? Like, I know there's not like a set instruction, but we are kind of still trying to figure that out. So, for example, I had my friend Flick on, who's like a goat dev. Definitely not a Saigar, but no, he's actually just a goat. And he and I did like, and Beans came on the stream and tipped me a
Oh,
Pengu.
oh,
Um, but we were going through like Scratch and freecodecamp.org, and it had nothing to do with abstract. And I kept thinking in the back of my head, I think that I'm only getting XP, not only, but I'm getting more XP if I'm talking about abstract. And I was like, but that's not my content. Like, I think that's frustrating because like I want to go on and like educate and I want to go on TikTok live. I'm right now on X on YouTube. I have all of the things going, but I just felt kind of like, am I supposed to just be talking about abstract? I kind of threw it in there like, hey, if you want to build an app on abstract, you still need to know how to code.
yeah.
So yeah,
No, I think it comes back to, why a lot of us got excited about consumer crypto, like even 10 years ago, like, when Ethereum launched, what, July of 2015. And, a lot of
yeah,
us came from consumer, right? Where again, like crypto rails, blockchain was just, kind of just shifting computing paradigm that would unlock all of these really interesting, use cases. And the upside was like, you know, so much of so all of Web 2 is really built on users, user generated content, really built on the backs of creators. And I think what these tokenized, decentralized platforms should do is give both users and creators more upside in the very
yeah,
platforms that they're helping turn into like Facebook, or Meta. It's like 1.5 trillion, right? That's really on the
right.
backs, like without the users, without like the content creators, like it's worth zero, right? It's just a
It's
pile of servers and a bunch of hyperscale data centers.
correct. Yeah,
And I think ultimately, as we're really designing, the incentive system, like what actually helps the ecosystem. Like ultimately, you're solving two problems with abstract, which is, you know, so the thing that everyone's been asking for the last 10 years, like when are the crypto curious normies coming on chain? Where like those tens of millions, hundreds of millions, the billion users, coming on chain, and then where are the apps? And they're kind of one and the same, right? Like,
yeah,
the users are not going to come if there's nothing to do, right? And they're not
right,
necessarily just depositing ETH to farm your chain.
right.
They're, and then at the same time, like you have all these experienced crypto curious Web 2 developers, entrepreneurs that just, they have like a crazy hit rate, because they just know how to build amazing, you know,
Yep,
apps and games and everything in between. They're not going to come over if there's no users, right?
right.
And so, with abstract design that way, I think where creators come into play is, you know, they they can bring their audience. It's like, yes, like there's top of funnel, right? Where,
Yeah,
Luca and then, the entire marketing community team, they're going to bring crypto curious kind of normies from, TikTok and Instagram. And uh, but I think ultimately there's another way to really accelerate like the entire community of users is as you're bringing in creators, they all have audience, whether you're
right.
Web 2 like yourself, but you're kind of like kind of in between. But as you
Yeah,
have like I was just talking to probably one of the top streamers for League, he's been just keeping a pulse on Abstract Live. He's like, at what point does
Right.
he move over, right? Luca kind of,
Right.
he grew up with, FaZe Clan. Like, again, like coming from Activision Blizzard, there's like, folks, from Call of Duty League, Overwatch League, StarCraft. Like, again,
Right.
they're all watching, right? And when do you bring that, group of folks over with their massive, kind of follower base and their viewership,
Right.
as well as like, you have people kind of coming in from various parts of the cryptoverse, right? Which is,
Right.
it's really just fragmented by ecosystem. So like as you're kind of bringing all these folks, like, methodically, like crypto natives first, and then, folks like yourself that, kind of live in, both web
Both
2 and
worlds.
web 3.
Yeah.
And then eventually you'll have like, the web 2 audience, the creators come over. I think ultimately what they get rewarded for is for bringing quality, users, into the
Yeah.
ecosystem. So whether that is promoting abstract, and I think probably in these early days, it might be promoting apps. Um,
Right.
but ultimately, what a creator will get rewarded for is just bringing, real people with discretionary income to come
Right.
to the, the amusement park that is digital Disneyland of fun. So
And I think you're right. Like, it's kind of like this cycle, I guess, like I'm thinking of the streamers on TikTok that are doing makeup, right? Like,
mhm,
there's a lot more streaming content than just like those NPC, like ice cream
yeah,
so good or whatever. Lot of makeup tutorials and that kind of stuff. And I think that the real draw for them will be the take rate and the fact that, TikTok takes 40% of what they're getting. And it's just
mhm,
obviously a lot of fear of like, is it going away? Which it's not. But to have
and
another platform, like there's ways that I've been able to like talk to some people. I haven't quite done the TikTok live with abstract because it's the technical piece of it's a little funky, but um I'm figuring that out. But I think that that is an incentive for them to learn about the crypto rails so
mhm,
that they can come on and have another stream of income. So there's, those multiple things where it's not necessarily just them learning about crypto and decentralization, but another form of content creation
yeah,
regardless. And so it's like they learn by proxy
yeah,
essentially. So that's been it's been cool to see. And then of course like people who have never gone live and they're just so excited about it and they realize like, oh, this is something I can do. Or even
yeah,
the people who are watching the lives that are getting
yeah,
XP. They're like, oh, that's all I have to do? I'll watch this
yeah,
crazy lady the other day I opened all of my Pudgy Penguin toys. They're not in
yeah,
here anymore, but I
yeah.
have like bags of them. I don't know why. Like months ago, I went to Walmart and just like grabbed a bunch of them,
But
and
we're not doing
I give them
anything.
to
Yeah, but we're not doing anything net new. I think what's interesting that
no,
it's just kind of in this singular kind of crypto consumer terminal. But like
yeah,
in the early days of Twitch, like I went on to watch just uh, people playing League and Call of
yeah,
Duty and it was you kind of found yourself self like splitting between like yeah like I'll follow players out like US based players Canada where I just really just enjoy the commentary and
right,
then you jump on these like kind of follow the Chinese streamers and they're just about absolute just running a perfect game just
right,
they're just their skills are just off the charts but I think with those early streams, it was just, it was super casual. I
yeah,
think that's what people really, really enjoyed. It wasn't produced.
right,
I think again, like that's something markedly different. These are all forms of entertainment, right? Everyone, you only
yeah,
have so many hours in the day. If you want something produced, you'll go watch, a TV series or feature film.
yep. YouTube
And
stuff that, yeah,
Yeah, so creators shouldn't overthink it. Just be authentic. I think
yeah,
Luca's been pushing that. Just giving those pro tips out as he's talking to different various group cohorts of creators. And
yeah,
then I think where it gets interesting is all of a sudden like this path to monetization. is finally there, especially for the folks who've been, maybe with smaller audiences, but dedicated audiences, like, they're doing
Yes.
spaces and they haven't really kicked
Yes.
the algorithm hasn't, paid them out yet. So you're not getting,
Right.
money from Uncle Elon, but all of a
Right.
sudden, like, they made $50 in tips. And
Right.
again, this is just the beginning that we'll just keep,
Yeah.
iterating on the platform, especially on the streaming side of the platform. And then all of a sudden, like, you start unlocking, additional ways to monetize your content and just know how and, just what, creators do best. And then all of a sudden now it just turbocharges as, you get to the point where, if I'm a goated, like, web 2 creator, it's like my brand deals are the same regardless if I'm on,
Yeah.
Twitch, YouTube or Kick. So then it's, well, it really comes down to, like, how much of the upside am I going to get with from the platform? And,
Right.
if we're not necessarily in the business of streaming, it's just part of,
It's just part of it.
kind of that
Yeah.
balance. Yeah, it's like that fine, delicate balance of how do you continue to attract, retain the top builders that build these amazing apps that then attract, real users with discretionary income. So, like, you're attracting and retaining these super users, and then you're also retaining the creators that, again, they're bringing in their audience, right? They're kind of this
Right.
built-in, promotion engine for these apps, and then all of a sudden it's like this, like, flywheel, and since we're not in that business of just streaming, um, then you can actually, make sure that, folks coming in from Web 2 who have a million, 10 million, viewers, you know,
Yeah.
their brand deal remains the same, but the upside from the platform, including, getting tips in crypto, like, that just makes it a no-brainer for people. And again, like, this is why, for a lot of us, like, kind of the core team who have contacts to, notable streamers, across gaming and, sports and entertainment, like, everybody's watching, which is, this is great. And I think what you guys are doing are first movers, and you're really proving out the model and really establishing yourselves. And then as they bring in their audience, again, this is where discoverability comes into play, where, you have, whether it's a gamer, like a notable streamer on the gaming side, or sports and entertainment, and, because we keep the creator pool pretty dense in talent, because, Finn and team have been slowly ramping that up, and then eventually we'll start, cutting folks who just are taking up
Yeah, I
someone's
think a lot
spot.
of people are wondering about, a few things where it's like we all know it's early days. I did a lot of streaming before there was XP available.
Yeah,
So it was like, we're kind of marketing. I had no problem with that, doing the marketing because I was building up my own brand. Um, I will say, like, when I did go to a couple of my usual, like, sponsors, it they really didn't understand why it was gonna be better for me to be on abstract, like,
yeah,
there's been some sort of, hurdles there, but it's been a week, so we're still, like, working these things out, and there's a lot of people who don't have brand deals or don't, have
yeah.
the kind of, there's a lot of, like, moving pieces here,
The,
but
the
it
interesting thing,
for
from
me.
yeah, but oh, just quickly, just an interesting thing about, for creators, it's the same thing for builders, right? Where builders are coming to abstract, because the bet is that not only will we have the largest, on-chain community, but it's specifically the largest on-chain community of real users with discretionary income. And,
Right,
when I was at CES last month, a number of notable large brands, they're looking at, Gen Z as a demographic, but they're
right.
specifically looking at, the crypto native Gen Z segment. And
Yep.
for them, it's like, these folks, you know, they're they have a pulse on crypto. It's not just,
Oh, yeah.
Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana. Like, there are crypto native folks, that are either advising them or that are just part of their organizations. And, you know, we just had, Mason and I had just, like, meetings stacked up where they're zeroing in on abstract, saying, like, if you guys can somehow get 1 million real users with discretionary income, that is, the especially, like, if you're trying to target that community, the conversion rate's
Yeah.
always much higher than just spraying and praying, right, with, like, third party cookies.
Yeah.
So I think same thing for creators. It's like, once Abstract builds up as this, highly dense community of users of, of a specific demographic, whether it's Gen Z, Gen A, and they all have discretionary income, versus just
Right.
a bunch. And this is why we've been so anti-farming. Um, then all of a sudden, it's like you as a top creator on Abstract Live, it's like, yes, like we want to speak to that, that million person community of real users with discretionary income. And what better way to then go through, like, the top five, creators that just have a pulse on that community.
Yeah. Yeah, I think yeah, it's early days, and to keep those creators, coming back, like, sometimes I don't know if I'm doing enough, and I know we talk about, like, not farming, but I'm kind of like, aren't we? Like, isn't that what we're doing? Like, I'm spending a lot of time getting these points, and, like,
Yeah.
I think you put out a tweet the other day about the Amex points, and I just had a conversation with somebody, on a different, stream where I'm like, "You have to think about these things as points, but they do get you something." So,
Mm.
like, I'm assuming that, like, all of the work I'm putting in and getting the XP is, eventually going to lead to something, and it's not just tips. Um, so I'm just wondering if, like, is it something you can speak to? Like, is there an incentive structure, like, when, the token launches? Like, is there something that we can all kind of look to? Or are we just right now in this phase of fucking around and finding out?
No, I think, you know, when you look at the XP system, it's built similar to like that of, a AAA game, where what you're really
Right.
doing is, I think, one, you're starting to, like, help people build up their on-chain reputation, right? So it's more of an
Yeah.
on-chain reputation system,
Okay.
and
I getcha.
that's unbelievably helpful. Like, 6, 9, 12 months from now, as new projects come in and they're trying to bootstrap, like, who's their kind of what's the fastest path for them to figure out who their thousand, true believers are, like that install base that then
Yeah.
can tell, their friends and family, and then you quickly get to, 10,000, MAUs, and then you're kind of on your way to 100,000. Uh, you
Yeah.
know, so I think there's that portion of it where you're on chain reputation, and no one's really done this well. And if you could do that well, then all of a sudden, like, every individual person, based on their reputation, now just gets solicited, right? Um,
Yeah.
by
True.
projects. And I think that's kind of one of the long term thing that I think we want to push out there. If you want to do consumer crypto, like, how do you make it easier for projects, crypto native, big brands, like, just to reach out to folks? And then it's up to the individuals to whether they want to, participate in that or not. And then I think what you're seeing with the XP system is, like, how do you, you know, how do you do it to where, your actions then kind of contribute to, like, some form of, like, long-term progression, with personalization, like, to where, like, within the abstract community, like, you know, your XP, the badges you have, the tiers that you unlock, like, this, kind of, like, is allows people to differentiate, within the ecosystem. And then also, how do you do it to where it's almost like a, by seasons, to where, just because folks have first mover advantage, like, what if someone comes in like 12 months from now? Like, how do you ensure that, they're able to, participate in
Mhm.
a meaningful way, right? Like, yeah, sure, maybe they won't be able to catch up, you know, rank up, and have that, amazing, on-chain reputation compared to folks who started day one. But, you know, maybe they're coming in and, they're, whether it's within a vertical like trading or gaming, like, they're able to, like, within that, like, you know, that season, they're just like, they just rank up super quick. And then they kind of establish themselves, that way. So I think the first thing is just, how do you capture, allow people to have, an on-chain reputation that just continues to grow. And then two, within the abstract ecosystem, how do you start, you know uh, ranking people, in a way where, builders, super users, and creators, to where when we do decentralize, and it's not just like, allowing them to own a piece of the network, that they're helping grow, But what are
Right.
other things? It just can't, I think it's too short-sighted to think, okay, and this is where I think the points to airdrop meta just, went sideways. It wasn't thoughtful enough, right? It was very
Yeah.
transactional. Like
For, for
you
sure.
grind for points, you get airdrop, and then everyone just pieces out and goes to the next thing.
Right.
Like there,
Right.
I think that portion of like rewarding people for contributing to the building out of the ecosystem and the community, like yes, like that's part of what this XP system needs to be able to do. But then also thinking longer term, like how do you ensure that this is something that's you know you know extremely valuable like a year from now, 3 5 years from now,
Yeah.
for people
Yeah.
participating in this ecosystem. So
I
you
think
know
I think it's really
that part.
important for yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Just I think just quickly is that part of just getting people uh, into giving them ownership into the network, like that's super easy, right? um,
Right.
I think
Right.
the thing that we're really trying to solve for is like how do we make this a platform to where 3 5 years from now it's like by being early, by coming in at any point in time into one of these like seasons, like as this what's similar to like a live ops game where you just really rank up super quick in that moment
Right.
and kind of prove yourself. How do you ensure like that actually gets rewarded by just the cryptoverse, right? Um,
Right.
that's the harder thing that we're trying to solve because I think when you could solve that, then all of a sudden, post decentralization of the network through tokenization, you don't see this massive drop off in TVL or users,
Right.
or like all of a sudden, like the people who are holding the bag are the creators, who've been creating
Right.
content for that ecosystem, as well as the builders
Right.
who come here, especially from they came from Web 2, where it's like I was building this game at Take Two or Activision Blizzard, right? And now
Yeah.
you know, I went from like 100,000 MAUs to like 28.
Right, because it's important for people to, like, sort of realize that, um there's such a culture of that the airdrop culture and the farming culture and all of that. And so I think, I like to ask the hard questions, I guess, but the reality is this is something like you said, on-chain reputation is everything. For me, it was I don't know what you call it, off-chain reputation, but like social media reputation and not taking the brand deals on TikTok that didn't align with me. But I think a lot of creators, what I've seen over the last few years is like they don't go and ask for sponsorship money. But the fact is that's how this works. Like especially in the gaming world, like these are professional things. And so on my side of things, the makeup creators or, the podcasters or whatever, it's almost like this air of virtue signaling and like, oh, I would never ask for money for that. And I'm like, why? Like you are advertising for these people. You're a spokesmodel, like I always say about
I think
Star Search back in the day. Like we're
I,
spokesmodels. So we should be asking for money. So once you like establish yourself, and that's the main focus and not what am I going to get from this? What kind of airdrop am I going to get for this? Because that isn't how you create this specific community where you can then go to a sponsor and say, look what I've done on Abstract.
yeah.
And so you like, hey, you sponsor or you audience, you got to come over here too, because look what
Yeah.
I've done. So I get what you're
Well,
saying.
yeah, ultimately it really comes down, especially on the creator side, like how do you use crypto rails to remove all the friction points so people can monetize their content, at a
Yeah.
you know at a faster clip, you know, or even greater than they would, on Web 2. If we could solve that, then you're going to get this massive pipeline. It just exponentially compounds of users coming in,
Yeah.
crypto curious users coming in on chain. And then when you have the users, you're going to continue to get the best, and retain the best builders. Because again, like, you know, uh, there's like two types of builders, especially in crypto. Is like there's the vast majority that are just looking for a grant and just like grant hopping, and they're doing that
Yep.
just because they couldn't make it in Web 2. And then there are like the
Yep.
far and few, right? And I think you've, interviewed a number of them. Like these are just like, just absolutely just like brilliant people. They've
Yes.
already, made it in Web 2. They're just looking at Web 3 just because crypto rails
Yeah.
just turns on a ton of interesting features and levers for them, right, to experiment.
Right.
And I think so. Like that's always been the big thing internally as we talk about the XP system. Like it's not how to decentralize and make sure ensuring that the best top builders, creators, super users own a piece of the network. Like that's like the easiest thing to do. The harder thing
Yep.
to do is how do you use crypto rails and how do you set up abstract this consumer crypto terminal to where you just remove all the friction points for you as a creator to do this full time as a living, and then even better than you would have on Web 2. Because if you can't solve that,
Yes.
you're not getting
Then
the best
what's
creators to come
yeah.
over. And if you don't get the best creators to come over and bring their viewers, then you're not going to you're not going to put a dent in getting a billion people on chain. um, so I think give us your I think obviously the one great thing about crypto is like you have tens of thousands of beta testers out there that are
Yes. We are beta
very,
testing. I was
yeah,
gonna say. You're
but
welcome for that.
every,
No.
yeah, I, I'm more optimistic in that I generally think folks in crypto are just shit smart, very opinionated, and they're very
Yep.
crisp with what needs to be improved. And again, like this is where, as we when we rolled out launch abstract, it's very clear how you can onboard just crypto curious normies, right? Email, Google, Touch ID, like you are up and running,
Yeah.
right? And then you are exploring all the
Yeah.
apps. You can swap tokens. You can watch creators. Like I think where we're working with where I think Saigar is focused on next with Eng product and design is how do you create degen mode, right? Like you can't force folks like like us. You know, I probably won't move off of MetaMask. Like that's just what I know.
Right.
But how do you meet kind of crypto natives like on their terms until they're
Yeah.
ready to embrace what Saigar and team have built out, and they may never. So like, how do you make sure that they can participate versus you're creating these like you're either forcing people to come onto Abstract Global Wallet and come into the portal and whatnot, or how do you just meet them where they are and just let them just uh, go you know go trading, go participate in a handful of activities that that resonate with them, and then they also that their reputation also gets starts to progress so they get credit for their contributions as well to the network.
Yeah. Um, well, first of all, Logan is watching and of course says farmers will get smoked. Also, Trenches Grinder says, "Yo, Michael, thanks for answering my DM." Michael's the best. I always have to like go back and forth between the abstract. I think that is also like yesterday, there was quite a few people in a group chat saying, "I don't understand why I can't stream." And so I did a very like ridiculous video being like, "This is what you have to do." And then there was a couple of threads that did that. Why have you guys not put out an instructional manual? Because it's complicated. Like, let's
Yeah,
be honest. You have to go live first on your StreamYard or Restream. Then you have to go
yeah.
back in, having to put the stream key in each time. So I'm just wondering, like, yeah, is that going to be changed? Are you guys just relying on us to teach each other?
No, that's on us. So give us that feedback. Obviously Logan's watching, listening.
Yeah.
I think Finn, despite having a billion things to do, as well as Luca, Vedant, like everyone on the marketing community side. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think just send us that feedback. I think
Yeah.
when you launch a platform like this, it is just that, right? It's a platform where it's a three-sided marketplace where you
Yep.
have builders, users, and creators. Like pretty ambitious in that you're creating a crypto version of Sony PlayStation account meets Apple App Store meets Twitch. And I
Yeah.
think in pushing that out, you're not going to get it perfect. I think
No.
I think when
And
you're
there's a
aiming,
difference between feedback and FUD, and people need to understand
uh,
that. Like, of course, there's feedback. You need the
yeah,
feedback, but absolutely no reason to go on crypto Twitter timeline and be like, abstracts a, LARP or whatever people are saying.
no, but
Like, I don't see a lot of that, but
personally, maybe because I'm a crypto geezer, I actually appreciate the FUD. And again, this is
yeah,
I think Kobe had said this a while back, that whenever there's a launch, you want to make sure that there's like half the folks there's like a good equal amount of like
true.
hype and FUD.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
anything
Yeah,
that's like a little too one-sided is just
yeah,
suspicious or just not going to make it. And within the
yeah,
FUD,
true.
there's a good amount of like actual like uh, quality feedback. I think rightful critique, and that's we're just logging all of that, right, and just adding it to the product roadmap, and Sidegar and the team are just like shipping like absolute madmen, like day in day out.
Yeah,
There's always like a big push at the end of each week. But I think the same thing on the streaming side. Just send us all of your pain points, and it just we'll just try to you know get something out there. In this case, instructions as soon as
yeah.
possible.
You can use my ridiculous video. There's been some really good threads, and I know you guys do retweet them. So, I mean, um, I think it's the ball has been rolling on that. So, I don't know if it's a huge issue at this point, but Logan is definitely. He says, "Oh, I'm in trouble." Great take.
Uh,
And I'm being yelled at for not letting you finish your statement. This is called a
yeah,
conversation,
yeah. No, 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 nobody's in trouble.
but
Um, I,
thanks
I think,
for the feedback.
yeah, I think we're, if we're trying to launch this iconic platform, and we, not just a core team, like us as an entire community, right? Because these
Yeah.
are the great thing about, crypto is that it's owned by, you know, nobody and everybody. But like you
Yep.
look at within Web 2, like all these iconic platforms from like Amazon, Uber, Facebook, YouTube, Netflix, Google, like the earliest versions, like the launch versions of those platforms, those goated platforms were just absolute trash, right? Like,
Yeah.
Uber was very much just ordering a black car so you can, roll up to the club like a baller. Like
Yep.
eventually, you started they started having different variations of cars, and now you've essentially revolutionized transportation of how to get from point A to B, and then now you have Uber Eats. So you know I think with the common denominator for all of those platforms that have gotten to this like goat status is just ruthless execution, right, and just
Yeah.
improving the product week in, week out, month in, month out. And I think
Yep.
this is where the team excels, where
Yeah.
you're already seeing this now, whether it's on the Eng design product side or the marketing community side, where the team is collectively is just rapidly iterating, and then also trying to find pathways to where it's not just us, because it can't just be us, right? It doesn't
No.
pass the hit by the bus test. Like you have to, and this is I think Hedge and the team have been doing this in the community side where they're just ranking up, whether it's the gigas or kind of bring people moderators from the community. So much of marketing is really now done for these apps really by the creators
Oh,
out there.
yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
it's not Luca out there being the resident CMO for 138 projects launching
Right.
within that week and month. It's really just whether it's on-chain heroes, Final Bosu, or road tracing. Really, just kind of finding like the creators that align with what they're building, and then they just
Yeah.
jam out. And I think that's where,
It has definitely been
and
more fun.
yeah, and
It's been more fun.
and then so much of like just how we're iterating isn't just us like internally like, hey, like this would be great, and here's our
Right.
wish
No,
list.
you
Like
are paying
I,
attention.
yeah, there's a lot of that where, yes, so much of it comes from within the team. Like even like say something like string like that. That was very much like Luca's brainchild, right? You just like this would be just killer, right? And that was him thinking like, he can't be the fractional CMO for every project. How do we
Right.
do this in a way where it solves multiple pain points is like just creating this platform. One, just so many of these platforms are built on the backs of creators, user generated content. So like how do you ensure for that? And creators are just absolutely just getting you know the shorter end of the stick compared to big tech platforms. And then how do you that's another way, like how do you what's another way to bring in hopefully tens of millions of crypto curious normies on chain, and that is through creators,
Right.
right? At the same time, how do you know how are you using creators to create this flywheel of just a singular place, a curated marketplace for not only just for users, not only apps but also content. But I think you'll see us being very opinionated about when you have this entire consumer crypto terminal, you know, that potentially represents a way to kind of create the crypto social graph, which this is kind of
Yeah.
something that's been, I think it's like a holy grail project that everyone's been, chasing for at least, the last 10 years, right? Um, but when you have, wallet combined with, just almost like your on-chain reputation, player progress, coupled with all the things that this entire universe of apps and this entire universe of creators, and people like viewing that content, and then you'll start seeing different, I don't know what, ability to follow creators, to be able to follow each other.
Right.
Then all of a sudden, or even like you're tokenizing reputation, like like even like friend check, like
It's
they
more
were
and then it's
early
SocialFi.
on all that stuff.
Like, you gotta
Yeah.
include all of it. Yeah.
And I think that's what the consumer crypto terminal represents is like, again, we're not going to get there by the end of this month, but I think what you're seeing is the opportunity to unlock, something that a lot of us have been chasing for a very, very long time. It's not
Yeah.
just creating this platform that, brings in, more users on chain and brings in, finally, answers the question of, where are the apps, but then all of a sudden it can also really unlock the crypto social graph that everyone's been chasing. Um, and once you do that, then all of a sudden it becomes like super interesting, and
Yeah.
a lot of levers start coming up. So, but that's some of that stuff. We'll incubate internally, and then you know rapid iteration with feedback from the community. It'll get better and better, and you can even outsource it to a certain extent to where you'll see people creating apps that kind of benefit from that. So you're creating these like social graph primitives that are baked into
Right.
the consumer crypto terminal, and the people who really just like take it a step further are the folks at the app layer.
Yeah, and that is where, like, I want to, because I also believe that everyone should learn at least some coding. So that's why I'm like, okay, well, I wanna teach people. That's kind of what, in my business that, that is, I guess, somewhat Web 2. I also consult for, the tokenomics for, Web 3 companies, um but I definitely teach a lot. It's a little bit DevRel, it's a little bit like, going into a company and reestablishing their sort of tech stack. What are they doing? There's little small business. And so I do a lot of this like video and, um, I just lost my train of thought. What was
Nobody, whenever you have these like shifts in
I
computing
don't even know what I was
paradigms, like
saying.
I saw this in Kubernetes, like the commercialization of Kubernetes,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
where the
Yeah.
microservices architecture, again, like that with containers, like nobody wants to hear it, right? But this actually became
Right.
like a CEO conversation at like Comcast and all the Fortune 500s because what you were selling them is speed to market, that you can actually, as Comcast, build software as quickly as Netflix, your Silicon Valley kind of
Right.
competitors. And
Right.
then what this ended up creating was unlocking a ton of opportunity, whether you're an entrepreneur developer that's building tooling to then either sell to a Fortune 500 company or get acquired. And then there was like
Mhm.
this explosion of need for like how do you actually teach microservices architecture, building apps in a
Right.
cloud native fashion. And there's folks on the DevRel
Right.
side, the education side, where they just couldn't, actually take on all the potential work just because everyone just started shifting. Because I think it's one of these things where once, it's kind of a give, it's kind of agreed upon that there's this shift, computing paradigm shift that happens. Yeah, like there's some of the folks who are, it always starts with the startups, but then you'll start
Yes.
seeing like the bigger brands who've been kind of following that, seeing what all the cool kids are doing. And in the moment that, 1 to 3 of these big brands start adopting crypto rails to improve their existing business, um, then all of a sudden the floodgates open, right? Because everyone is
Right.
like, okay, like, you know, company X took the risk. It's obviously working out for them. And it's like, how do we quickly catch up? And then it's just, you know, the floodgates. And you kind of saw some version of this like early days with like Ethereum mainnet, where
Mhm.
consensus, I think was working with, I forget, it was either KPMG or Ernst and Young, where they were using, Ethereum to do supply chain and other,
Yes.
you know, I think applications for provenance and, for certification. Obviously, like
It started
the
out
idea
kinda
was right.
boring.
Yeah, but like
Yeah.
people just printed, right? Like there was an entire
Yeah.
industry around just being able to, create education and workshops and just helping with hiring of people to, build these really interesting workloads on crypto rails. So it's coming.
Yeah.
Um, it was too
Yeah,
early, and Ethereum wasn't the right,
definitely.
obviously the execution layer because it was just too slow, too expensive. But we're here now to
Right.
where, that was what, 2017, 2018.
Mhm.
It was pre-COVID. And again,
Yeah,
like
what yeah.
we just,
Right before.
yeah, we just needed like, we just needed a minute for us to get to the
I
place
agree.
where the infrastructure was there and you had this layer, this consumer crypto layer. And then all of a sudden now it's just a matter of people leveraging it. And it's more just, I see people trying, especially the global brands, like they're trying to figure out, this makes sense. All of a sudden, there's this entire demographic of Gen Z and Gen Alpha that has discretionary income. So that's very attractive to them. So now they're just
Yeah.
trying to figure out like what part of, what part of their existing business actually can be benefit from crypto rails. And it's always like one of three things. It's like, how do I make more money, save money, or, better, engage my customer, fans, and partners, which comes back to how do I
Yeah.
make more money. So once they figure
Yeah.
that out, it's just rinse and repeat for anyone on the consultancy side where, you know, again, like Accenture, just, Deloitte, these guys literally just
Yep.
spin up these like practices, whether it's like the AWS
Yes.
practice, the Kubernetes practice. And it's like, you
Yes.
know, it just prints like billions of bucks.
Yeah. I've I've thought about in the past, like, going to I had an opportunity with Boston Consulting Group, and I don't know about Deloitte, but I just, for a lot of people, sort of independent consulting is easier because you're, not really a part of this giant, like mechanism of
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's legit these Deloitte, and but you kind of get to move a little quicker and do, iterate a little bit faster and find the companies that really need to move quickly because you go through those the giant machine of the consultancies,
Yeah.
and they just put these sort of the stack. It's like, "You need to
Yeah.
do this." And they just keep rinse and repeating it. So, it's a different world in Web3. It's a different, like,
Yeah.
I'll sometimes not take clients on because I'm like, "I'm not the person for you," you know? You need somebody
Yeah.
way more, adept in whatever it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, just going back to the, building things, um, if you can think of it, you can code it, you can build it. And that's another piece of that that's happening on Abstract is like really pushing people to build the thing you want to. And
Yeah.
we're going to cultivate the audience for you. You guys build us cool stuff. I'll bring my audience over to use your cool stuff. That's going to then, help
Yeah.
Abstract grow.
Yeah.
And so it's one big cycle.
Yeah, and I think this stuff is, it will be obvious in hindsight, and all you gotta really
Yeah.
do is just look at the previous shifts. Um, and as long as blockchain is the next computing paradigm shift, like the same rules apply to where like the folks that just made, just captured all of the economic value in the rise of cloud, in the rise of mobile, in the rise of
Yeah.
containerization. Same thing's gonna
Right.
happen for, you
Yeah.
just got to position yourselves. And I think it really comes down to, you know, picking the right ecosystem to where the majority of users are. So like, whether you're, you know, on Solana versus abstract versus base, like you'll do fine.
Yeah.
I think it really comes down to the nuances of what each of these ecosystems are really tailored for. Like we're just, obviously, on abstract is really tailored towards just applications that are fun. And fun
Yeah.
is a very broad tent. And then on base, what
Yeah.
you're seeing there is just, they're really trying to get into the payment space, right? With what, Tron is doing and Tether. And then on the Solana side, it's Las Vegas. And I
It
say
really
that
is.
very affectionately, in that I love Vegas, love
I had a
degeneracy, like
gamble
a lot
last
of
night
us.
that paid off.
Yeah.
Paid off. I
So,
didn't retire
you
my
know,
bloodline, but it paid off.
yeah. So, and there, it's really, despite there being like 500, different chains, L1s, L2s, L3s, like there's these dominant ones that will attract, users and creators and builders. So you just get,
Yeah.
that's not that hard to figure out. And I think it's becoming very clear which each of these ecosystems and communities are really positioning themselves. What kind of workloads they're positioning themselves for. Again, like we're digital Disneyland. We don't pretend to be Las Vegas. We're
Right.
not,
Right.
we're not Wall Street. Um, maybe we'll get there because shit smart, builders, want to leverage the community, the existing workloads and do that. But I think for now, we're kind of all in our lanes, and I think that's where you don't really see us. We can still kind of have this, PVE approach to things because you know, again, like even if you're creating a competing kind of theme park ecosystem, like again, like there's more than if we're Disneyland, I'm sure there's also room for Great America, all right, for
Yes.
Lotte World. Like it's fine. And I
Yeah.
think right now everyone is trying to create an ecosystem to where there's just rapid prototyping at the app layer because there isn't a killer app yet, right? That where my mom's calling me and telling me about like when mobile made it when she's like hollering at me about like have you heard about Venmo, like it's like that's when like the laggards like my parents are now like
Yes.
fully like mobile first. Like once that
Yes.
happens to where there's this crypto native app, people don't even know that it's on the blockchain. That's
Right.
when the entire industry just like absolutely just goes mainstream. So in the meantime,
Yeah.
like you're trying to encourage every ecosystem to like hopefully mass experiment, hopefully something really interesting, a use case comes out with a sustainable business model, and then everyone really just starts to like zero in on that and just refine it.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things happening in the world that are kind of helping or maybe hurting the regular world to understand crypto. I know my parents are not a fan of the current administration, but they certainly now ask a lot of questions about crypto. So I'm like, I can't be mad at that. Um, I've been able to just say, look, I voted for crypto. So, and there's nothing else to say. So I think there's just a lot of conversations that are, able to be had now. And so I think, abstract
No,
definitely has,
and it's
has started a conversation that hasn't necessarily been, um, talked about in this way before. So, like I said before, I uh, bullish on the team and the infrastructure um and the feedback. Like I do think that the team's listening. So I think there's something to be desired with making sure that the process is smooth for people to stream because it is a little bit, it's a little complicated. But I think once that gets figured out, people are just excited again. They're excited about
no,
crypto again and like
no.
doing fun things instead of the stress of like chasing down a whitelist and chasing down this or that, even though that is a thing right now. And I do see that. And I hope that people kind of see that there's other content there that they don't need to be just
I,
chasing down, you know, whitelists and that
but
kind of
that
stuff.
but that but
But
that's
it's
a friction point, right? And like how do you
yeah,
remove that friction, right? Where people aren't just like dumpster diving, on the timeline trying to chase down, a whitelist spot, like how do you do to
Yeah.
where just you just being doing things on chain automatically, because of your badges,
Right.
because of your XP, because of your tiers, literally just like,
Right.
someone like Kevin from Final Boss who just like, goes there, or like, on chain heroes, and they just like, you know what, I'm just gonna rack and stack, filter by these type of badges, which I think is going to be the core of my 5,000 person community that then will then go,
Right.
share it with friends and family to continually grow their respective sub communities. If you just did it to where that system existed, you've essentially delivered the thing that everyone's chasing, which is the whitelist,
Yeah.
with while taking the friction out of the system. I think that's what everyone's,
Okay.
and nobody's really thinking about that stuff. And again, like for all of us that kind of came up, from the early days of crypto, like you're trying to like write, this list of like all the amazing things about crypto and all the things that we hate about it, right? That just there's just
Yeah.
a lot of friction, and it's just like you're just going down the list and you're just tackling it one by one to where you're just just making it just super easy, because like there's that next generation of crypto curious normies that are going to come in, and you don't want to then essentially give them the same bag of problems that we kind of either figured out, like we just settled on, like all right, this is fine, where we got to manage our own cryptographic key material, and we're chasing for
Right.
whitelists, and you got to know someone to get into like uh, a seed round. Like how do you remove all of that for that next group to where they can enjoy all the upsides by just being them, right? Just being on chain, doing
Right.
all the things that, hopefully identify them as a top user within a vertical or within an app, or, that are just, get noted, hopefully get, um, rewarded for or notarized for just bringing people on chain, like
Right.
through like a
Wait,
referral
so the
system
apps
or
are also the app builders, like, are also incentivized with XP? I didn't really think about that.
no,
So
they're incentivized through the retroactive builder rewards program, which will
oh,
kick in,
okay, that's right.
uh, later this year. And I
That's
think
right.
for them, it's you you give them a choice, which no one ever gives them. Builders a choice. It's like one, it's like you can if you need the cash, like you know you provided significant contributions to growing the ecosystem. So, but you need funds to continue to fuel your growth. It's like okay, like take take USDC. But then there's others who are well capitalized and they just want to also participate in the upside of the network that they're helping to
Right.
really build up. So then they'll take native tokens as a form of compensation. But right now, I think what happens is like whether it's like OP who has I think a great retroactive builder reward program, but it's not necessarily consistent. So how do you make it sure that it's consistent? Like it's every six
Yeah.
months and then how to giving people choice, so it's not just tokens, like where you know these are entrepreneurs, they're not traders, right? So they're just going to like
Right.
turbo dump it, and it's
Right.
not either the not the exact amount that they were hoping for to run their business or grow their business,
Right.
or you're settling them with like yet another thing to think about, right? Managing someone else's tokens. So, like again, like
Right.
just take all the friction out, and we can't do everything, but we can at least try to make it super easy, across the three different cohorts of builders, creators, and super users, just to you know hopefully this is just a better ecosystem and a community to be a part of.
So will there be retroactive rewards for content creators in the same way? You don't have to answer that.
No,
Is there a
no,
builder rewards program for us?
no. There should be.
There should
We
be.
we
Yeah,
haven't gotten that far because I think we're just really just ruthlessly focused on building this like three-sided marketplace platform, um,
absolutely.
as
You
well as
had to
rolling
have
it
stuff
out.
for us to use to
Yeah,
create content for.
when you get into thinking around decentralizing the network, right, the ecosystem, the community, like
Yeah,
you have those three groups in mind, right? Both the builder, which obviously they'll get upside through the retroactive, builder rewards program.
yeah,
Super users. Panoramic governance is you know the current prevailing approach where they get the line share, this the sequencer, the chain revenue. Someone could actually propose something else, right? That is even more value added for super users. And then for creators, like there's different options that you can take where it's, you could have either like a TikTok like creator fund, right? But again,
Yep.
it's a much more dense creator pool.
Yes.
Or there could be, I don't know, whether or not, like, I think once we get
Maybe
to,
there's
like,
a badge.
yeah. And again, like, badges can also, they can come in, it's no different than Call of Duty, where there's different levels to the same badge, right? Like right now, there's
Right.
like
Right.
there's like, I don't know, like a voting badge. I voted, right? Like, okay, I voted once,
Yep.
I unlocked this badge, but like, you could have it tiered to where it's like 100 votes, 1,000 votes. Like there should be
Totally.
stratifications of how much someone is participating. Like, again, we don't
Yep.
want to you don't want to do it to where it's like, oh, like you're forcing people to vote. Like, how do you do it to where you're rewarding people for just organic behavior that they're doing? Like, there's people who just love upvoting, right? Like, how do you reward
Yes.
people? How
I
do you
forgot about
categorize?
that. I used to do that.
Right? And funding, right? Whether you're funding your wallet for $100, $1,000, or 10 million, like, how do you? What are the different stratifications of that content
Exactly.
creation, right? Like, the amount of, like, followers that, concurrence, versus cumulative. Like, how do you track this stuff? And you let folks know, like, again, like if I'm 3, 6, 9, 10, 12 months from now, if I'm coming in as an entrepreneur, you know, let's say, Finn, Logan, that whole crew has really done an amazing job, which they have, is curating this super dense collection of, creators. Shit, like now, even if it is 500 or 1,000, man, like that's still head spinning. Like, who should I, reach out to first, in what order? And if you had some
Sure.
badge to where it gave you a sense of, like, this person is, has these certain badges, whether it's for like concurrence or followers. And right now, like, you're not seeing that because we're trying to make it fun to where everyone's experimenting,
Yeah.
right?
Totally.
But
Totally.
or these people have, they're focused on. You can look at their other badges, so they're obviously big into gaming versus trading versus, in your case, like, just, how do you acknowledge that someone has a very large Web 2 audience,
Yes.
which might not be like for everybody, but it might mean everything, for that particular project. So again, I think the badges
Or
are an
even, like,
interesting way.
how do you determine how many Web 2 people we've brought over? Because you've got these big content creators right now on Abstract, and I'm just saying big, like, that are
Yeah,
getting, a lot more than, like, me, and
yeah.
it's fine. But then, like, how if once I start bringing people over from TikTok, like, how do I get rewarded from that? And, these are just, things that come up. It's not like, "Oh, it has to be figured out now." But yeah,
No, and
there's those levels of
it's a dynamic system, right? The XP system,
yeah,
where it'll constantly just calibrate, week in, week out. But
right.
I think the one,
That is
and
nice.
yeah, and whether it's Luca or all of us, like, just been on record saying, like, the creators who are in that top 1%, like, they're just gonna crush it. Um,
Yeah,
so that's already kind of ingrained in our minds of, and you have to do it that way, right? Um,
yeah,
to where, and this goes to top builders, right? People who build these apps that, and you look at, like, the Apple App Store, like, there's only a handful of apps in there that really, like, like Candy Crush is like bringing in like 400 million like MAUs. Like, that isn't
right,
like that's in a certain tier of, applications. Like, that is not the same as, like, the, you know 10,000 other, like, kind of casual gaming apps. So, how do
right,
you differentiate amongst apps? How do you differentiate amongst content creators? And then you kind of, I think what the plan has always been is, like, how do you provide, oversized upside to those people who are, again, it's like, it's no different than, like, say, luxury goods, like, or even, like, say, streetwear. Like,
right.
luxury, like Hermes, is really 90% of that revenue comes from 10% of their customer base. Like, the
Yep.
stores that you see in different cities, those are just like marketing, like, yeah, it's like installations where
Yeah,
this is why they're rude to people who just kind of come into, like, a Hermes. They're like,
'cause
we
it's
don't
not
really
like a
care about
shopping
your,
experience.
yeah,
Yeah,
we don't really care about your one transaction, because the
right.
people who are driving 90% of the revenue, like, we have them on speed dial,
special
right?
orders and yeah, they're like
Like
being
we're
shipped to these
literally,
things on
yeah,
private
we're literally,
jets.
yeah, literally sending like a person, with a, a Birkin bag, like handcuffed, like on a private jet to come
Right.
to your house to recreate the Hermes experience. Like, and I think
Right.
that's
These
where,
stores are not it.
yeah, it's literally just like and it's probably the stores just exist for like that 10% if they're when they're traveling. It's like, oh, I forgot my bag. Let me just go to this outpost to then go pick up a new bag for whatever function
Right.
or need that I have. And I think it's the same thing for us in that, you know, there's only a handful of builders, super users, content creators that really like drive the line share of the traffic, the audience, the mind share. And it's, I think, well, we haven't put a lot of detail around it yet because we're seeing how the network and the ecosystem, is organically growing. You then, we'll be pretty heavy handed in opinion. It's like, okay, like these people like really eat because you have to, right? If they're not
Yep.
economically, like stable, then they're not
Incentivized.
going to,
Oh,
yeah, and
yeah.
they're not going to continue to do what they're doing, right? It's like all of a sudden, it's like
Right.
you have this
No.
like amazing app, but you're trying to be, egalitarian, and everyone gets
Right.
some middling like upside. That's not helpful to anybody,
Right.
right? Like you got to
No.
be like Apple, and it's like, you know what? I'm going to king make Candy Crush because they're bringing in 400 million people into this ecosystem, and when I'm doing discovery,
Yep.
that gives other people building really interesting games a higher probability of bootstrapping, their user base to 10 million because it's like,
Right.
uh, you know, we saw that you, Michael, are playing Candy Crush, so let me, or even Clash, like let me introduce you to some like game, some like app. So again, like
Yep.
that's very much top of mind. And obviously, if we're not doing that, like yell at us. But it's definitely not going to be. It's definitely not going to be an egalitarian ecosystem. And that the majority of users, like the upside, really is just you get to come to Disneyland, digital Disneyland. You
Yeah.
come have fun,
It's been fun. I'm not gonna
but
lie. Like, it's been fun.
yeah, but you have to
I
reward
mean,
the people who
multiplier
are.
took a lot of my money, but I probably wasn't doing it right. So I definitely have like fucked around and found out a little too much. So, and I did create a token on Gatekeep. If anybody wants to buy it, it's the Pepe token,
I'm
which
gonna have to
has
buy it right
nothing to do with
now.
Pepe. But yeah, buy it right now. I don't even know how any of it works. Harrison was on the chat with me while I was doing it. It was very fun, but nothing has made me money. Let's just put it that way. But it's definitely social reputation and people knowing that this is the kind of thing they can do and being an
Yeah.
example. And then of course building your own personal brand. But aside from all that, it has been fun. And I was like, "Oh, I'm not a gamer." And my friend was like, "Why don't you do like go on and play games and just be real bad at it and like just your facial expressions." And I'm like, "I think I might do that like a couple times a week because it's fun, but like I'm just not good." So I did the Pudgy Penguins
Looks.
like Frogger one like on Pudgy World, and I just couldn't do it. I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
just an old lady playing Frogger. And I don't know. People thought it was funny. So there's tons of things you could do, even if you're not a gamer, or doing like the specific things. Bark says hi. He says, "Oh, look, it's two legends." Yep. You're welcome. We're pretty awesome. Uh, and that was cool. So Steve and Chris that have been doing their morning show on X for 11 billion days,
Yeah.
took it to abstract and are loving it. Those are two of my friends, my good friends.
But like those guys, like I think Steven mentioned, I think maybe both of them, where it's like, of the 11 billion shows, they've made zero. And off of just like
Yeah,
one abstract live stream, they made 50. Like,
yeah,
and
exactly.
uh, I think that's what you're trying to solve, like amongst the many things for creators. Because like there's folks like that are in Web 2 that are just crushing it. Like they have the brand deals, like, they're getting like a special, like, like a bespoke take from the platforms. Like, but the
Right,
vast majority of folks, like they're creating amazing content for a very like loyal, viewership. And it's like
right,
it's just for funsies, right? Like this is just like their passion project
ooh,
after a 9 to 5. And it's like,
right,
how do you how do you help them, like, turn this into something, shit, like, if you can, have them focus on it, like, 100% of their time, then all of a sudden, like, content gets better, right? They're able to,
Exactly.
continue to, like, take their audience, like, just iterate, like, whether you take the show on the road, whether
Right.
you do just a ton there's just a lot more that unlocks when you just give people the freedom or just give them their time back to work on that actual craft. I think
Right.
that's the hope for a lot of these creators. It's like, come on over. Hopefully, the tipping is kind of just a signal of what's possible,
Right.
and
Exactly.
and then we have to figure out how
Yeah,
do we make
nobody's
this.
gonna make $1,000,000 tomorrow. I'm sorry, not
Yeah,
sorry. But this is
yeah,
thank you, Luca. But,
yeah,
this is sort of the beginning of things for people to
yeah.
see, like you said, what's possible.
Yeah, and there's how do you set this up to where, yeah, you participate, like, in the upside of the network that, the ecosystem that you are helping build out, by bringing your, your viewership, into the community. How do you find other ways to where it's just, again, it's just like a no-brainer for brands to even want to cut a deal with, like that top 1% of abstract live creators.
Right.
How do you make this so much like what you saw in panoramic governance? Like, how do you make this easy, to where, you know, that projects want to, like, work with, commercially work with certain creators where it's like, so I think
Right.
the brilliant thing about Web3 is, like, you don't have to have marketing. The community is the marketing engine, right? Like, you don't have to have,
Right.
like, a 950 person, like, marketing team like Google does. Like, you can literally just have, you know, a handful of absolute, chads, like, whether it's like, in our case, it's like, Finn and Logan. And then all of a sudden what
Mhm.
they're really doing, or like on the community side, it's like, Hedge and a few, part-time mods. And what they're doing is, like, you're just activating, like, the people within the community. You just got to make
Right.
sure that they also share in the upside, but you're doing the same thing,
Yeah.
to where it just makes it easy for, like, entrepreneurs to be like, yes, like, I align with, like, Brooke's audience, like, just how she, what her thesis, content creation thesis is, it aligns to their project. And it's like, okay, like,
Right.
you know, the money that I would have spent on an in-house marketing team, it's like, I'm just activating a handful of, people, creators.
Mhm.
I think that's just where marketing is moving as a trade craft, right? Where you're just decentralizing that.
Right. And, there's a couple things, people used to ask me like, "Oh, do you monetize your TikTok?" And I have always used social media as my own marketing. So it's like if
Mhm.
you give, I've been a Gary Vaynerchuk fan from like wine library days. Like I used to watch him
Yeah.
on YouTube, but he wrote that book. Jab, 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 right hook. And so, like,
Mhm.
if you give and give and give, and then you ask for it in return, being a consultant, like, all of a sudden I had this global audience. So I was
Mhm.
very locally here in Idaho, consulting with small businesses and nonprofits. I had a business where I did, small business IT, but it was very localized. And then all of a sudden I had this global audience and was like, oh, let me just teach you about all these things that I know, in the tech world. And then my clients then came to me. It's like, oh, well, now I need you on this bigger project. And then it just moved into like Web3 stuff where it's like, oh, I'm going to teach everything. It was back on Clubhouse.
Mhm.
And my content creation was my voice and teaching people stuff because then the companies that are like, oh, she knows what she's talking about.
Yeah.
I'm going to now hire her. So that's where the money came from for me mostly. Yes, there's brand deals and there's this social uh reputation, but also the reputation is for almost like it's you're showing people it's like a job interview, or like
Yeah.
you're showing people
Mm.
your own marketing, your own personal brand. It's not
Well,
just I need a, I'm going to represent this company or whatever and almost like a
yeah.
sponsorship, like holding a Pepsi in the in the camera. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so
I
there's
think a lot of,
those types of
and
things
also
too.
a lot of content creators will use, kind of existing Web2 platforms as top of funnel,
Right.
where they'll continue to
Right.
maintain their presence, whether it's TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, depending on where your audience lives. And
Yeah.
then, they're gonna then say like, hey, like, we're, streaming. And, you know, as long as like, maybe at some point those platforms are like, it's like Facebook turning off the APIs for, when Zynga started like blowing up, right? With
Oh,
games
yeah.
like, like, Farmville. But, I think creators will continue to use existing platforms to kind of continue to gather a large audience and then alert them when they're, creating content, like on Abstract Live. There's something similar, less for content creator, just similar to content creator. Like probably some of the biggest creators of user generated content are athletes, right? Like
Yeah.
you,
Yep.
I don't know, like like you look at any athlete and they just have tens of millions of followers, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, even Twitter, where their presence isn't that large. And
Right.
they're just creating all this content. And talked to a number of them over the last, even the last, say, 12, 10, 12 months. And, their number one problem is, they're some of the most prolific creators of user generated content and they capture none of the value, right? And some of these folks have
Right.
1 to 5 people on staff just managing, right? Like they're posting it themselves. So it's like it's authentic content, but there's folks in the back
Right.
end just like maintaining all this.
Pushing it out. Yeah.
They're yeah. So now they're like spending $1 million in payroll, and they're not capturing any of that
Right.
value. And
Right.
where I propose to them, it's like, what you could do, because they were asking like, like what's good in Web3? Like, how do we take this, how do we leverage this? Like, is it, you know, are NFTs coming back like 21? Like, what coin should I get into? I was like, actually, the thing that crypto rails, there's two things that allows crypto rails allows people to do is one, there's the transparency part of it, and then there's ownership. Like if a
Yeah.
group of the most goated athletes like created their own protocol, like almost like their own like I didn't call it OnlyFans, but essentially it's like a subscription based like protocol of
Right.
like exclusive content where it's like them like in the locker room, like them working out, them it's like stuff that you wouldn't post on Instagram for free, right? You can then tease
Right.
it on Instagram. So even if you had collectively there was like 100 million followers, like even if you had like a 10% conversion rate, all of a sudden overnight this gated streaming like video sharing protocol would be like the number one, not only app just on crypto rails but like probably one of the the hottest apps just coming out, right? So
Yeah.
there's things like that where content creators could also do where they can literally just create. There's folks that it's just easier to stream on Abstract Live, but then there would be folks like athletes that if they get their shit together and through tokenization, you could do it to where like everyone comes in, like it can be weighted by like reputation and like I don't know, like,
Yep.
just hypothetical, but like say LeBron James comes in and he owns 25% of the token supply, and then as Wembenyama comes in and like he starts moving up the ranks, winning chips and MVPs, like he
Right.
gets up to like 15%, but LeBron goes down to like 10%, but his 10% is still worth more because the FTB on that token, like say it's not even trading, just like if it were a private company, it's just markedly higher than 25% off of $100 million valuation. So
Right.
I think these are like ideas like, as people come to us, like, it's not just, can we do an NFT project or can we,
Right.
how do we launch a coin? Like, we try to push
Yep.
folks into thinking much, much bigger to where it's like,
Yep.
you know, you guys, we're solving one thing for content creators with Abstract Live, and there's like another problem for, certain content creators like athletes, where it's like, how do you capture more of the upside where it just doesn't go to Meta? It doesn't go to,
Right.
ByteDance. And again, you plant
Right.
these seeds, and these are probably not going to play out for some time. But now you're starting to see like people getting much much savvier and smarter. Like, oh shit, like we didn't think that we could own shared software together, or we
Right.
didn't think we thought it
Exactly.
was binary to where we would have to leave Web 2 instead of using it as a top of funnel
Right.
mechanism to then come into not into crypto. Like you design like the user experience similar to what we've done with Abstract to where people won't even know they're on crypto rails.
Right. Right. Last question is, I've been so fascinated with panoramic governance and just the, research I've done, and obviously it's out there because the docs are there. Is it something that, like, someone like me could start talking about? I know that's not really the question I'm trying to ask, but like, is it something that would benefit to talk about? Is there gonna be a time where the panoramic governance thing is, like, gonna be talked about by abstract, and I can kind of, like, get in on that since I'm so fascinated by it, and, like, maybe now is not the time because I don't know.
Yeah, I think the time comes like once you decentralize the network, right, where you tokenize it,
Yeah,
so everybody and nobody owns, abstract, the network, the ecosystem, the community. And then you get into, okay, like you submit proposals like, to, you know, execute on panoramic governance. But that
right.
is just one, right now it's like the prevailing thinking of how do you reward super users. And I think with all the things that we're doing, like how do you reward top builders? Like that is through the retroactive builder rewards program that hits
Yeah,
every 6 months. How do you reward top, creators, right? So like, I think Luca and team are putting a lot of thought around that. It's like whether it's like inspired by like TikTok's creator fund or
yeah.
something, you know, vastly different, but like similar,
I will tell you it
similar
created better
outcome.
content. When TikTok did come out with the
Mhm.
creator fund, I was there. I was part of the beta
Yeah.
testing, and, it it was an incentive for me to make better content and to teach people and entertain them. So,
Yeah.
it's a great way. It's just they ran out of money.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Right. But at some point, like
So
you don't, at some point, the flywheel just gets going to where it's like nobody really they don't really need to give out like, AWS credits for people to build on AWS. Like nobody's going to go out there and,
right.
buy like blade servers, top of rack switches and like storage appliances. Like
Exactly.
this, this is how I'm going
Exactly.
to scale like my app. Like, no, it's like you just swipe your credit
Yeah,
card and you use AWS, right? And I think
exactly.
it's the same thing. At some point, year 3, 4, 5, like whenever that is, and a lot of this is also just based on macro and just like the speed of which crypto goes mass market. You don't necessarily need to incentivize builders and creators like by hopefully building on abstract in the consumer crypto terminal. There'll be other mechanisms that allow them to like have a sustainable uh, you know sustainable outcome. But on the
Right.
what I think what panoramic governance represents is like, you know, some early thinking around how do you also reward super users? Because like those are the ones like you want to, continue to
Yes.
attract and retain, that 10% drives 90%, if not 80% of, just like the gross, the GDP within the consumer crypto economy. So
Yes.
early thinking was like you pass along, a disproportionate amount of the network revenue to them. Um, another way there could be other. Again, this is just one, example. Hopefully, though, there's smarter folks than us that can even, you'd be surprised. Like there are
Yeah.
shit smart people out there where they might
Yeah.
submit a proposal, a white paper, where it's like, yeah, this is great. Like it doesn't have to always come from the core team. Um,
Yeah, of
it
course.
could come from the community. A lot of smart people, putting thought around this stuff. It
Yeah.
might be something from Vitalik himself, right? Like again, like Uniswap
Right.
was, very much his idea that Hayden then went and operationalized. Like, what are some of these other mechanisms that allows super users to disproportionately, um, you know, have upside in the network, the platform
Right.
that they've essentially, built off of their backs. So yeah, I think there's probably post tokenization, decentralization of the network. It's probably a good time to start thinking about, okay, how do we
Yeah.
make sure there's a pathway for super users? And it could be panoramic governance. It could be something even better. I don't know.
Right. Right. That's just something that's yeah, it's like this thing that isn't necessarily like, "Oh, this is what's gonna happen." It's sort of a this is this cool yeah, I don't know how I'm saying it. I'm gonna cut the interview. I don't know if you have kids or not, but
Yeah.
I have a 20-year-old son who got scammed, uh, Web 1 scammed, by this old gentleman that I'm like that sold him a car that does not work, and
Jeez.
I'm all emotional about it because, like, of course, there's buyers beware and, like,
Yeah.
there all of that, and I told him to take it to a mechanic before, but, I mean, this was, like, egregious. Like, the car it's a, like, pile of junk. So he just called me. It was his first car that he bought himself, and he's like, "I can't get" "It's gonna be like $5,000 to fix." And I'm like, "Oh god." So, I might break some kneecaps. I'm just saying, like, I don't care how old this guy. So I'm gonna deal with that. I'm like mama bear right now. I'm just like,
Yeah,
who does that? Who takes advantage of a young kid that was so excited about this cool car?
yeah,
Anyway. Anyway, I appreciate you so much, Michael. This is really
yeah.
cool. I
Always.
love the honestly the live streaming of just having a conversation. Was it was great to get jump started before I even knew Abstract was gonna do streaming. It was the very first time I was like, "Hey, let's do a space." And you're like, "Is it video?" I'm like, "Sure." And then here we are. So it definitely has gotten me back
Yeah.
into a cool state of mind. So thank you
No,
again.
no, I love it. Again, like just continue to send us. Obviously you have a direct line to the man himself in Saigar, so
Yeah.
let him know all
Yeah.
the things that need to be fixed on from like a end product perspective, and then yeah,
I will.
whether let me like we're in a chat with Finn,
Yeah.
so
Yep.
you know
It's good.
whether it's
It's perfect.
instructions or anything else. But
Yeah.
again, like I think internally, like Luca kind of put it out there saying like, top creators are gonna crush it, and it's really on us to figure out how to actually operationalize that. So still early days, but there's
Yeah.
we're not short on ideas of how to do it. Just because you look at Web two and how they've done it, you kind of start there.
Yeah.
What has worked? What about those programs like the TikTok Creator Fund? Like where did it
Right.
fall flat? And then you're trying to
They
figure
ran
out
out
like
of money.
what's yeah.
That was when it fell short, just so you know.
Yeah, and maybe that's the thing. It's like, hey, like maybe you merge TikTok Creator Fund with like I don't know, like some type of like university endowment model to where there's money into perpetuity.
Oh.
Again, I
Right.
you know
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
you
Alright, I'm
know
gonna end the stream. Thank